and the Nevada Democracy Project. I'm John Ralston with the Nevada Independent, and I'm here with Maria Silva of Vegas PBS. Happy to be here with you. I'm honored to be here with such an esteemed TV veteran as you.
And I'm honored to be here with you. We've done this before, not our first rodeo, but we're excited to be here in our Vegas PBS studio with all this wonderful audience and our legislators who are here today.
I'll let you talk in a second about the Nevada Democracy Project, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to let everyone know that we really have a special event this evening. I've covered politics in this state for a long time. I don't remember any similar event where we have 3 legislators who have agreed to come on and answer questions from a studio audience that we have here. And let me introduce them. They're taking time out of their busy schedules, and the session starts in just a few days, and they have a lot of studying to do, so we're glad they showed up. I'll introduce them real quickly, Maria. We have State Senator Melanie Scheible here. She's also the Chief Majority Whip, which means she's boss of all the whips and can boss a lot of people around. We have Assembly Majority Leader Sandra Jauregui, who is the boss of bosses except for the speaker. I think she'll be speaker next session, but that won't come up. She's already mad at me, Maria. And we have Danielle Gallant, who is a Republican and from Henderson, and she has graciously agreed to be here too. They're all going to be players in the next session. 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, and they graciously gave her their time, Maria, which we're happy about.
And we're so grateful to have you here. I want to find out why she's angry with you, why she's upset with you. You can tell me later, though. We don't want to take up too much time.
She's never angry, really, but inside, maybe.
Okay, we'll talk about that. And of course, we have to talk about our wonderful moderators today, Renee Dixon, who is our host, our talented host of Nevada Week and Nevada Week in Person.
And from the Nevada Independent, we have Rocio Hernandez, who is our great education reporter. If you don't subscribe to her newsletter, Indie Education, you're missing out on what's going on, not just in the Clark County School District, but across the state.
She does a wonderful job. And now we want to talk a little bit about the Nevada Democracy Project. So proud to say it's a joint initiative between our 2 trusted news organizations. We've had the honor of being out in the community. We've been in West Las Vegas, East Las Vegas, Henderson, CSN on West Charleston. Now we wanted to do something a little bit differently, right? We wanted to bring in our legislators here to our Vegas PBS studio. I see a lot of wonderful familiar faces. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? Good? Good. To have them here for this very special Nevada Democracy Project that we're doing.
Well, one reason this is great, and this fits right in with the Nevada Democracy Project, which is try to actually have us listen to people as opposed to us telling people what's important. And what's special about this is so many people in Clark County are so far removed from the legislative session, and this is a chance for them to be up close and personal with these legislators, ask them questions directly. Of course, there are ways to get a hold of them during the session, email, phone, you can come up to, but this is a really special opportunity. I'm glad we're part of it, Maria.
And as you said before we get started, it is all about you. We want to hear from you. We get your questions ready. Also, if you're at home and you didn't make it out here, we're streaming live on YouTube right now, and we also have questions. I'll be taking your questions throughout the evening.
Yeah, I don't want to take any more time from Amber and Rocio. I just want to say quickly to the studio audience, I'm sure this won't be a problem, but this is about civility too, the Nevada Democracy Project. So that we want a civil discussion. You can ask pointed questions, that's fine, but we don't want any disruptions, and if there are any disruptions, you'll have to leave. But I don't think that'll be a problem. I see all these smiling, calm people out here, Maria, so I'm sure we'll be fine. And, you know, that goes for the legislators too. You can be removed if you get out of hand.
I can tell they all get along, though.
That's right. All right, should we turn it over to the moderators?
All right, let's go ahead and do it. We're ready for this.
All right.
Nevada Democracy Project, take it away.
Thank you, John and Maria. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you to our state lawmakers. Before we begin, let's go over how this evening will work. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. We will come on over to you with the mic.
Yeah, and Amber and I will be holding the mic for you, and we want to get as many people as we can, so please keep your questions and your comments succinct.
John hit on this, but please everyone be respectful, no cussing and no shouting.
We also want to remind everyone that this event is being recorded, and portions of this conversation will be used in future news coverage. It'll also be available in full online on both of our organizations' websites.
And with that, let's get started. Who has the first question? Thank you for being ready. And I'm going to step on the inside here, and then I'll ask that you step in here so that we don't block that camera that is right behind you. What is your name, sir?
I'm Brian Scroggins, and I have two areas of concern. I was wondering about legislation. One is I'm a chaplain here locally with police and fire, and I run a nonprofit that supports first responders. So I was wondering, is there any legislation, either positive or negative, that's going to support law enforcement or is not going to, or fire? And secondly, I'm a property owner here. I've lived here 36 years, and last session there was some water issues. They had a septic sewer conversion program they were talking about, and nothing really got resolved. But then after the legislative session, I got a letter from the water district saying I can't develop the land that I've paid property tax on for the last 25 years. So I'm in kind of a discussion with them, so I wanted to know if there's any legislation that's going to solve the septic sewer. I'm all about conservation. I used to work for the water district as their public information officer decades ago, but I want to make sure that what I've invested in for my family is going to come to fruition. And right now, the water district is telling me I can't develop my own property. Thank you.
Okay, so septic, sewer, and then you started with first responders. Who would like to begin?
I can
Assemblywoman.
start. I carried a bill last session that came directly from the Police Protection Association, and we're going to expand on that this next coming session. One of the things that the bill did was expand protections for first responders. After 1 October, a bill was passed that allowed first responders to take workers' comp claims for like stressful, traumatic situations. Many first responders suffered from PTSD because of the events of 1 October. Unfortunately, the law was written in a way that said you had to tie your PTSD back to one single event. I have a brother-in-law in law enforcement, and I know that a lot of the PTSD that doesn't come from one single event. It comes from multiple events over the course of 20 years on the job. And so after speaking with one of the law enforcement officers and really diving into this, we realized that we needed to fix it. So I brought that bill last session to expand it to make sure that if a police officer was suffering from PTSD over the course of their employment from a series of events that they saw, that they would have it covered. And that expanded to law enforcement and firemen as well. And we're gonna expand that. So we're working again on with the Police Protection Association to continue to expand those protections.
Something else that we're doing for our first responders is actually working on lowering housing costs. Something that we are seeing increasingly, especially with younger members of the force, people who are just starting their careers in law enforcement as first responders, is that they can't afford to buy a home in the Las Vegas Valley. And we want members of our community to be invested here. We want people who come to Las Vegas to join the fire department or to join Metro or to join another law enforcement agency to stay here. And so we're working on buying down some of the interest rates for Nevada home buyers, as well as reducing and having a little bit more regulation over the larger national, international type corporations that are coming into Nevada and buying up lots of homes at one time, so that we can ensure from the very beginning of their careers that these members of our community are able to be strong participants and accomplish that goal of homeownership if it's something that they're seeking.
Assemblywoman Gallant, would you like to add on, or do you want to go on to the water use issues, either or both?
No, I'm glad Senator Scheible brought up the issue about these hedge funds coming into our communities. I know there was a bill last session that we heard in revenue, and I think we need to explore it again. There's several states where they've reduced how many homes like those hedge funds can purchase, so that we can make room for the middle class homeowners. So, and I think that will make a big difference, but it's a big undertaking. And so I'm looking forward to being able to work on that a little bit more. I think one of the other things we can help support our law enforcement is to just help them make their job easier. And sometimes education is involved with that. So I am carrying a bill with Metro. They asked me to carry a bill that will bring in a certain curriculum in the schools so we can educate kids about good touch and bad touch, because that is definitely an issue that is near and dear to all of our hearts. So however we can, I'm always open to supporting, and I like being able to use education, so maybe we can try to reduce the crimes before they happen.
Let's touch on the water use issues as they relate to someone's property value. Who wants to start there?
So I think I'm familiar with the bill that you're talking about. There was a bill that allowed local governments to mandate that people who have empty lots that haven't been built on to convert to sewer. With the bill that was passed at the legislature was permissible, meaning it allowed them to do it, and it's up to the local governments who wanted to implement it. So some local governments did implement it and say, like, we are going to mandate that people who have empty lots convert to sewer before they are building. You know, we recycle almost 100% of the water that goes down our drains. I think the only water that we don't recycle is water that goes into septics, and I think that was the goal of the bill. So the legislature didn't mandate it. It was permissible, and it was up to the local governments to be able to make their own decisions.
And perhaps that's where this gentleman should go and ask next, I guess. Yeah.
Certainly, it's always valuable to be involved both at the state level and at a local level, and to understand, you know, that you have local authorities as well, your county commissioners, your water board, who do make decisions about water use on individual properties. And I think also every session, I sit on the Natural Resources Committee, I'm the vice chair of that committee, and we discuss water use every single session because we live in a desert. There is never enough water, and we're also constantly competing and negotiating with multiple other states for use of the water that comes through the Colorado River. And so as lawmakers, we depend on members of a lot of different communities to come up with ideas for ways that we can conserve and preserve water resources. And so I know that 2 years ago when we were at the session, one of those ideas was to switch everybody in Clark County who was on a septic tank to sewer. And I think it's fair to say that the legislative process worked. We had robust discussions about it and determined that the costs outweighed the benefits of that particular bill or of that particular policy to require every person who's currently on a septic tank to switch immediately to a sewer system. But that doesn't mean that we stop looking for solutions. And whether those solutions include a phased approach to transferring people or transferring properties from septic to sewer, or whether it includes focusing elsewhere. We've done a lot of work out in rural Nevada where we have a huge agricultural communities that rely on a steady water supply, and they have been making bounds and strides to reduce the amount of water that's necessary to grow, 1 acre of corn, 1 acre of hay, to raise, 100 head of cattle. We've reduced the amount of water that's necessary by implementing technology, by incentivizing the use of new technology, and by utilizing, working with nature instead of against nature to grow crops in the soil and in the season that they're most adapted to.
And it's important to note that Southern Nevada Water Authority is actually the gold standard. People look to us because we're the gold standard in how much water we recycle. We're able to capture, I think it's like 98% of the water that comes out of the drain.
All right. Does anyone on that side of the room have a question? Okay, get Rocio over there.
Yes, I'm trying to get to you. Okay, introduce yourself and let us know what you want to ask.
Sure. Should I? Kim Small, CEO of Signs of Hope, and Signs of Hope has been serving Southern Nevada for over 50 years, supporting victims of sexual violence and exploitation, specifically human trafficking. And as you're aware, earlier this week, a lot of nonprofits were thrown into a frenzy, those of us that receive federal funding. And so now we are being proactive, as we have always been. But I'm asking you, what does that look like if this should come again, which probably will, and how can you assist us that are in your community doing work to support those that are in need?
Okay, so I just got back from Carson City from sitting through 2 weeks of budget hearings, right, where we had every single state agency, mostly every single state agency come before us and go over the budgets, what their needs are, whether it's more positions, whether it's more money for services. After Monday, one of the things we started asking every single agency is what percentage of your budget is federally funded? And I will tell you that 37%, over 30% of Nevada's budget is funded through federal dollars. That's just our state government. That doesn't include all of the various nonprofits that get federal funding to provide services to Nevadans. One of the nonprofits from Northern Nevada that also deals with domestic violence has a housing program to house women and children that's 100% funded by federal grants. And so we are talking about a real problem if these cuts happen, right? If these cuts to vital services happen, we are looking at a deficit of probably $8 billion that we're going to need to fund programs. I mean, we're talking about, think about it, veterans programs, right? We're talking about housing programs. We're talking about, I know they mentioned that maybe Medicaid isn't going to be included, but Medicaid portals froze and weren't allowed to accept money. So we're talking about 800,000 Nevadans who get their health care from Medicaid. We're talking about women and children who use WIC, the Women and Children program. We're talking about SNAP. So all of these are going to be in jeopardy. These are cuts for Nevadans, like services that Nevadans depend on to live.
And Kim, your question was, what are they going to do if that funding ends up not continuing to come? Do you have an answer to that at this point?
I mean, we're going to have to look at our budget because we won't even have enough money to fund budget. And I will tell you that, as Democrats, some of our priorities are making sure public education is funded and healthcare is funded, but we're going to have to look at programs that might not have the money.
Okay. Assemblywoman Gallant, would you like to add anything?
I mean, so domestic violence is a really important issue. It's something I've actually worked on since I was in college. I have a mental health background. That's where I started out, was working with groups of women in domestic violence areas. And I know how much of a struggle it is when it comes to funding and grants. I sat on the board for Safe House for 8 years, which is similar to what you guys do. And I live right down the street from St. Jude's in Boulder City now, so I'm a big supporter of that. So I think, there are state funds, right? I mean, like you guys have the VOCA with the marriage license. And so honestly, I know this pause is very scary, and I believe by February 10th is when the department heads need to come in and sort of do an audit and say, like, what are the essential and the important services? And I think at that point, we'll have a better idea about if or how much of assistance we need to work on here at the state level in order to support organizations like yours.
So I'm not sure if the word you used was scared about what's going to happen in the future, but that's what I am. I'm scared for what's going to happen with this federal administration because they pulled the rug out from under us. There are thousands of Nevadans, if not millions, who depend on federal funding. When we set a budget, we do it like any other household. We look at the money that's going to come in a particular year, and then we determine how much we're able to spend. So in a household, that might mean my salary, my spouse's salary, and that's it. Or it might be my salary, income from investments. It might be money that someone else gives us, a parent, a dependent, something like that. When a state builds its budget, we depend on certainty. We depend on knowing the revenue that we have earned as a state. We depend on recognizing the fees, the taxes that we bring in. That's what funds our government. And we depend on getting our fair share back from the federal government because we pay into that. That money doesn't come from nowhere. It doesn't fall off of trees. Our state contributes to those federal funds that then come back to Nevada to provide vital services to Nevadans here every single day. And so for a president to tell us, actually, never mind, you get nothing, is like your job telling you, actually, never mind, we're not going to pay your salary this month. Or actually, never mind, this source of income that you've had for the last 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to cut it off tomorrow. And so I think that is unprecedented for local governments, for state legislatures to have to respond to that kind of severe undermining. And so I don't know what our response is going to be. I don't know how you turn around and make up the difference of billions of dollars that were there yesterday and are gone tomorrow.
All right, next question. I know you've been raising your hand. What is your name, sir?
Richard Reyes, student at CSN after a 20-year career in media and entertainment. Question is, I want to make a counterpoint to what was just discussed, in regards to federal funding and these social programs and whatnot. So we have a new administration, right? So they're having to clean up what's been building for years. We had $10 trillion, $20 trillion, $30 trillion in debt. So I think I want to really ask, the legislatures and just the community, can we really afford these deficits? And, as far as the federal government making these types of asks of the state, tough. Life's not fair. Now, what are we going to do? What's the next step?
Thank you.
I think one of the things that's important to note is that it's not just social services, right? We think of subsidies like dairy farmers get federal subsidies so that we pay less for milk when we go to the store. Those kinds of things are going to impact every single Nevadan, not just those who are on social services. We think of other programs like the Department of Agriculture in Nevada. The Nevada Department of Agriculture is almost 80% funded by federal dollars. It's not just social services, right? Those are Nevadans who are going to lose their jobs if their agency doesn't exist, right? And think about everything that the Department of Agriculture touches. That means the cost for everything is going to go up. So there's real world implications for cutting federal dollars, federal grants. It's not just social services. So many things take federal subsidies.
Let's also go back to one of the first things we talked about today, first responders. We receive federal grants in order to implement new pilot programs for our law enforcement officers, to utilize new technology, to create new programs that seek to proactively prevent crime, that seek to improve community policing. And without those federal grants, we're on our own. We don't have the same resources to conduct that kind of new, innovative police work that we've been working really hard to implement for the last 10 to 15 years if we don't have the federal funding to do it. And we're not going to have an easy replacement for that federal funding. That's the biggest problem, is that you want to change the budget, that's fine. You want to adjust the amount of money that the federal government gives to, to our police officers, to our first responders, to our military, to the National Guard that's stationed here in Nevada. That's a conversation we can have, but to take it away and then tell us to deal with it is not the way that a government is supposed to function.
So I'm obviously going to disagree to a certain amount. So I think at this point, everybody's getting very scared and nervous that we're going to lose all of our federal funding. And I think this is very similar to the fact that, first of all, the American public have asked for the government to be more efficient, to save more money, to reduce the deficit, because we are a sinking ship. So that is part of the mandate. This is what the voters have asked President Trump and his administration to do. Similar, here we all know CCSD. We have no idea how they've been spending that money for the last 20 years, and we keep asking for an audit and some accountability. And I don't think any of us would disagree for us to finally open up those books and find out how they've been spending all this money. And I think this is the same scenario where Trump's saying, look, you guys have until February 10th to be able to tell me how you're spending your money. We're going to take a look at it, because we don't want to be spending $150,000 for, trans to do at the libraries in Venezuela or something. I recall something like that coming up on Doge. Or there was millions and millions and millions of dollars going to NGOs in Afghanistan that was actually just a pipeline to the Taliban there, right? And so we're funding our own demise, essentially. And so I think the Trump administration is really taking a look at this, saying, where can we cut? How can we make sure it's going to go to Nevadans? How can we make sure that we're going to keep our country safe, make sure that our kids are educated, and provide essential infrastructure services, which is what the point of the federal government is?
Well, it's important to note, you touched on education, but remember, a big portion of education dollars come from federal dollars as well. And we actually did pass a bill last session to audit CCSD.
But it still hasn't happened.
No. But we did.
And they keep squirting by it. So,
They were just auditing that, Chief.
I have someone here who's been waiting patiently. Here. Should I sit or stand? Stand, introduce yourself, and I'll be holding the mic. Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, do you want to turn around slightly? Okay.
Oh,
Introduce
hi,
yourself,
hon.
and what's your question?
Oh, I'm Alicia Velgos. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I went to St. Anne's, which recently closed after 70 years, which I was very sad about. but people can't afford Catholic school anymore. And I went to Bishop Gorman High School. And Lake Mead is sinking, which I'm sure you know because there's not enough water. But my question is Nevada even prepared for Trump's immigration policies?
Sorry, we went from education to water to immigration, so we're...
I was happy that Trump got elected because growing up here, I did see my father live on tips. And the IRS was knocking on our door because he wasn't paying enough taxes. And he was living on tips to afford Bishop Gorman High School and working at the Desert Inn Hotel. So that's why I was excited for him to be in office. But now we have an immigration problem, which I never saw growing up in the 80s at all, attending Bishop Gorman High School. So, you know, people can't afford Catholic school, but now what about the immigration policy? Are you even prepared for Trump's immigration policy?
Well, it's up to each of the municipalities, right? Like Sheriff McMahill had announced, like, I've got enough on my plate. If the feds want to come in and ICE want to come in, we're not going to get in their way, but we're not using our resources there. So I think each department is deciding whether that's something that they can handle or not. Is that the question that you were wondering? I'm sorry, I'm trying to make sure that we answer it completely.
Yes, I mean, you were talking about the water, and that's another big problem because Lake Mead is sinking. So I don't know what you want to do about that, or if you can do anything about that. But I think immigration is a big problem now. I never saw that growing up in Las Vegas.
But now we have lots of immigrants here, correct? And, you know, obviously people come here illegally and we want to support that. I think it's really unfortunate that in terms of we have like a DACA population where they were young children or they were born here and this is the only life they know. So I think there's nuances in how we look at this. From what I understand and everything that I've read, the focus is on violent illegal criminals, right? So and that's where they're focused, and I think that's going to take them years to address.
Senator, Assemblywoman, do you want to weigh in on this?
I think there's a lot of chaos and confusion happening right now at the federal level, and you referenced what are we going to do about the policy, but the reality is we haven't seen a policy. He hasn't laid out an immigration, like a concrete immigration policy or plan yet to the states. So I mean, as a Nevadan, as a legislator, I know that a priority is to make sure that all Nevadans are safe. And, you know, I think if I'm hearing from the bottom of your concerns, it was economy, right? You're saying that your father had to work on tips to be able to send you, and now that doesn't seem possible, things are closing down. Well, I think the root of what you're asking is what are we going to do to fix the economy, right? Let's talk about jobs. What are we doing to create jobs so that Nevadans can get to work and deal with the rising cost of things, right? And I know that we have many bills coming through the legislature that are going to deal with how do we create jobs. I mean, I know, and I'm just going to take this moment to plug my priority bill, right? The film tax credit, which, you know, on day one is going to create 19,000 construction jobs, and then, you know, once completed, 15,000, you know, permanent jobs. And I think that's what the root of your question is. You know, what are we going to do so that Nevadans have the ability to have a job where they can raise a family on, put food on their table, a roof over their head, and have a little money left over at the end of the month to take their kids to a family, have a beer with their guys or brunch with their girls.
All right, I have said that I would ask this gentleman over here for his question. You don't have to stand up if you don't want to. I do. Okay. What is your, I'll hold the mic. What's your name?
My name is C.T. Wong. I'm a happily retired Air Force. Spent 30 years in the Air Force, almost. And all that time, we're going to address budget, okay? And all that time, about August through September, fiscal year begins on 1 October, as you know, in the federal budget. That last 2 months, it was always scramble to spend all the bucks you got, and we ended up buying paper clips and paper and rubber bands, and you know, you got to fill up the supply cabinet. Mm-hmm. That's insanity. And I've always advocated, but I was never in a position to do that, is why not have zero-based budgeting? If all those departments come up to you guys and say, we need this, 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 and this, you need to say, why? What for? Why do you need that? I mean, challenge them. It's not a Christmas list when it comes to budget time. We don't have the bucks, right?
Senator, start, or you want one more question?
Part one. Part two, what are we doing to reduce the cost of living in Nevada? What can be done?
Senator, I'll have you start.
Thanks. So I think largely that is the way that our budget works in Nevada. We are constitutionally mandated to pass a balanced budget every single session for the next 2 years, which means that our budget cannot exceed the amount of money that we expect to come in to Nevada's bank account. And I think there are many agencies in Nevada who would love to be in the position of having extra money to spend come July or August. And, it sounds like maybe that was an issue at the federal agency where you spent your career, but that's not what Nevada agencies are doing right now. We do review their budget carefully, line by line, through a series of subcommittee meetings and committee meetings and presentations to subcommittees of the legislature as well as the legislature as a whole in order to determine where we're going to spend our money. I think that Nevada is disciplined, especially when you compare it to other states. And,
If I may, several years ago, I looked into the PERS system in Nevada. And you can go online, you can see all the guys that are listed on it. The retired coach of UNR, his retirement pay was close to $250,000 a year. This is like 10 years ago. Automatically, he gets 5%. So does everybody else on PERS gets 5% increase. Does that make sense? He was working as an advisor to Kansas City Chiefs. He's getting millions of dollars from Kansas City Chiefs, and he's getting $250,000 a year from PERS, and he's getting 5% increase. Are we taking a serious look at PERS? Is that realistic?
And I believe that may be a different organization,
That is a
agency.
different question.
Yeah.
But
That
I
is a
think
very
I'd
different
like to go back to just government and budget.
the
Yes. So I think there's ways that we can take a look at wasteful spending. And I'll use a perfectly good example that's on a small level, but if I'm finding it on a small level, it's happening more and more. So I've got a school in my district in more of a rural community. One family moved away from this school, so the school went from 15 kids to 5. So I tour the school, and there are 5 teachers to 5 kids. And they were very proud to show me their science program, which were all organized into Rubbermaid bins. And so I commented on it, and she goes, "Oh yeah, we have enough materials." Well, I have been hearing that we don't have enough materials, we don't have enough money, we're stretched thin, right? Across the board, that seems to be the theme. Well, the district, what they do is they send enough materials for a class of 36 to every single school, regardless of how many kids are in there, okay? So when you have such a big system, there needs to be not just auditing the books, but going a deeper dive in terms of actually auditing how these resources are being allocated. And that is a step that I've actually talked with the controller, Andy Matthews, to start looking into as we go through these audits within the districts.
I mean, I have to address the elephant in the room, because if you're really concerned about the budget and overspending, we have to start with the structurally deficient budget that the governor sent us. That was $335 million short. He overspent and sent us a budget that was $335 million deficient. Constitutionally, he has to send us a balanced budget, and he did not. After budget amendments, right, the budget that he is proposing is still $85 million deficient. So if we're talking about spending, right, it's $85 million that don't exist that he's proposing spent. And we do. My colleague noted that we go line by line. So state agencies, they propose to the governor, they give them their Christmas list, right? But we look at every single budget within a state agency, whether it's replacing computers, whether it's money for new hires, right? They want to increase the number of positions they have. We go through every single one of those, and then we decide, do they need it or do they not, right? And if there is money left over, they don't spend it down. And I know that because we look at the budgets and we get to see how much money is being balanced forward, meaning money that's going to go to the next budget because it wasn't spent in the year for the fiscal years before. And one of the things that we do in Nevada that we've had for a very long time is the Merit Award, where we actually encourage state employees to find efficiencies in their agency. So if someone actually, perfect example, if someone finds that, hey, we don't need all of these materials for arts and crafts, let me actually send a suggestion, they will be bonus for efficiency like mechanisms that they find, which is something that I'm really proud of.
And something else that we don't do is we don't punish agencies for saving money. I think that's what you see in some other budget systems, where if a certain department doesn't spend all of, if they're given $100 and they only spend 90 this year, then next year they'll only get 90. Well, we don't do that in Nevada. If an agency asks us for $100 and we give them 100 and they only spend 90 of it, but they come back the next year and say, we're so excited, if you'll give us 100 again, we'll be able to increase our programming by 10%. We say, okay, we'll give you the $100 again, and we're excited to see you grow, and they do. And so I think that also helps us to ensure that money being spent in Nevada is being spent wisely. I'm not saying that we're perfect, but we do have certain principles that we stick to when it comes to approving the budget that help us to be effective.
And I do want to say, I think thank you for your service. I think you had mentioned that you spent 30 years in the Air Force, so I just want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you. Also, the Nevada system of higher education, right, is who hires our coaches for UNR and UNLV. So would they be in charge of determining whether a coach gets PERS? Could that be changed at their level?
PERS is the
Public Employees Retirement System.
yes.
That's it.
Because the legislature is not hiring the coaches, it's the Nevada system of higher education.
That's very true, and we really don't get involved in a lot of staff negotiations and hiring agreements. Not only would it be
Collectively, usually.
a lot of them are collectively bargained. Sometimes it would be inappropriate. Sometimes it would just be difficult for us to go around telling UMC, this is how much you can pay your CEO, and UNLV, this is how much you can pay your tennis coach, and
Metro, this is how much you can pay. This is how much you can pay your
Right.
officers.
right.
Not everybody gets 5% increase in retirement pay.
Rocio, I think you got questions back there.
That's within your purview.
All right, we're going to move on to a question over here from this audience member. Can you introduce yourself and, what's your question, comments?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Linda Perez, and I'm the CEO of the Shade Tree. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us this evening. First, I have two things. One, I just would like clarity on what you mentioned about President Trump doing this freeze to look at nonprofits who are not functioning properly. I think we do that. If I'm not mistaken, we do that in the application process. I mean, filling out a grant takes quite a bit, and there's a lot of criteria that we have to be responsible for, and given that you sat on the board with Safe House, you know that. We also have site monitorings that if we have federal grants or city grants, we get monitored to make sure that we're spending correctly and all of those things. So the Shade Tree has been around since 1989, and our clients are domestic violence, human trafficking, and homeless, women, children, and because of our partnership with Noah's Animal House, we also house pets, which is rare for a shelter to do that here. With the funding that's being taken, I'm also a survivor of domestic violence, so everything that we do, our programming has enhanced. So what will happen if funding is taken away from me and my staff and my clients is we will go back to being an emergency shelter with the minimal funds that we have. And the purpose of me and what we do at the Shade Tree is to break that cycle. So we don't only just focus on the emergency crisis anymore. We're focusing on a true program so that when they leave our program, that it's sustainable, because the average of someone going back to their situation is 7 to 10 times. So having a shelter and services like what we do, if we're not really addressing the issue and what the problem is, then we're going to keep seeing them back in the shelter. So that's a huge concern to me. The second thing is, my shelter is in North Las Vegas. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area, if you've ever even visited the area, but I encourage you and invite you to come out to see where the Shade Tree is located. I have victims in my shelter, and I have to have a full security team, an armed guard on each shift to protect my victims because of where I'm located. I just had a murder happen outside of our gates just last week. I'm in the middle of Catholic Charities, the Courtyard, Salvation Army, and if you come visit our shelter, outside you'll see many people, and I have a security team, and we're trying to keep that area clean, but I have traffickers that are circling my building. I have abusers that are looking for their person, and I'd like to know what the city or what the government will do in terms of safety for not just my clients, but my staff as well.
I appreciate Shade Tree and everything that you guys do, and I am familiar with the neighborhood and the area. I know it's kind of a rough place. So I don't think there's anything on the table at this point. There's just a freeze, and so I don't think we really know what's going to happen, and I get it. It's scary. I mean, I remember when Trump's last administration, right, and he froze Section 8, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with all those people in their housing? But eventually things worked out, and they continued to provide services and funding for those essential services. And I don't believe that there's been any part of the conversation, again, this is all developing, where he wants to, or his administration wants to, take away from domestic violence and human trafficking. I mean, he really does care about families and women, and he's trying to find those 300,000 kids that have just been missing from the border and somewhere in the United States being utilized in God knows what, right? So I share your concerns with this, and I know it's something that we're all going to be watching.
Yeah, our clients aren't just Section 8 though. Like, we have every single
No, I'm not saying your clients are, but like at a time where he froze Section 8, there was like a month where we weren't sure come January 1 if rents were going to be coming in for folks. But eventually it worked out, and they resumed the funding. It was not an issue, but we were worried with that government shutdown. So I think we've been nervous in the past, but I know the American public have asked the government to just be much more succinct, right, and much more efficient and spend less money so that we can get in this inflationary spending that we've been under for the last 4 years, which will then also help reduce the cost and help all of us live a much more affordable life.
Of where I'm located, is there anything that can be done with reaching out to Metro, or if any of you ladies would like to come and take a tour of our shelter and see where we're at, that could help us, or maybe you know someone that can help us. We just had the Department of Homeland Security come and do a vulnerability assessment just this week, but I'd like to know more about safety. So if you can just consider that as you are going up to Carson City, and hopefully you can come visit us.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I would love to come take a tour of Shade Tree. And I think that you also touch on some of the toughest issues that we tackle as legislators, which is ensuring people's safety wherever they are, whoever they are. And I think that has become more difficult under Trump's administration, because people who are not here either did not come through the immigration process, or as many of my clients say, they don't have papers. They're afraid. They're afraid to seek help Help not just if they are experiencing human trafficking or domestic violence, but they're afraid to seek help if they're the victim of a violent crime or the victim of a small crime, or they're afraid to seek help to get that, voucher to get housing, and so they end up on the street. And I think that, it's all tied together. And one of the things that is incredibly difficult for us to do as legislators is to try to address the housing insecurity that people are facing in Las Vegas without enough funding. And now here we are talking about reducing funding instead of increasing funding. And so I said it earlier, I'm scared for what that means for us as a state, because we do not have a backup plan. We do not have hundreds of millions of dollars in our rainy day fund. We do have a rainy day fund, but it does not have the kind of money that would be necessary to make up for all of your federal grants, for all of your federal funding, plus all of the federal grants and funding for all of your partners and all of the other nonprofit agencies that really step in and do the work in the Las Vegas Valley to ensure that people are able to have a lifeline and to have a safety net, whatever it is they're facing, whether it's domestic violence or human trafficking, whether it is being without a job, without a home, whether it is mental health crises, or whether they are people with disabilities who struggle to maintain employment, whatever it is, we depend on our nonprofits here in Las Vegas to provide crucial social services, and we are at risk of losing them.
Your turn. You've been waiting patiently. What would you like to ask, and what is your name?
My name is Sergey Montano. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at a biotech company out here, but my question really comes as a graduate of university now, and then being born and raised here in Las Vegas, I've had a privilege to go to public school, zone school, magnet school, as well as private school. I was happy to see bipartisan legislation passed for increasing school funding, right? We now spend on par or more than more educated state counterparts per pupil, and our teachers, some of the most well-paid teachers in the country, right? So why do we consistently rank lowest in education? What are those states doing, like California, like Massachusetts, that we're not doing here at home?
Well, first, I think we should give kudos to the Senate Majority Leader who introduced the bill to set aside $250 million to give teachers pay raises. And that was it was clever. We've never done it before, but so many sessions we had earmarked money for teacher pay raises, and it never got to the teachers. And now we ensured that teachers got the raise that they deserved. And so I was really excited about that. And the Senate Majority, speaking of her, she actually has a bill. I'm very, very fortunate that every single session that I've served at the legislature, we've sent more money to public education than the session before. And last session, we sent historic money to public education, $2.3 billion, right? And so I'm proud of that. But you hit the nail on the head, right? We need more transparency, we need more accountability, right? We need to do something to make sure that we're sending the money and that our schools are succeeding. And Senate Majority Leader Cannizzaro is actually introducing a bill, the Education Accountability Bill, which is aimed to do just that, right? We've done a lot. We created an Education Accountability Subcommittee, a subcommittee of interim finance, to bring the Clark County school districts before us so that we can ask them questions about how they're spending the money. Last session, we passed a bill to order a forensic audit of the Clark County School District, which hasn't been completed, but you better believe once it does, I bet you we're all going to be nose deep in that and reading it and making sure that they are, resolving the findings. But now the Senate Majority Leader is introducing the Education Accountability Bill, which is going to create an oversight board that will also have enforceable tools within their disposal, and that's something I'm really excited about.
Do any of you know whether that's what other states are doing that have led to their success with the same amount of pay as he brought up? Any thoughts on that or knowledge of that, Assemblywoman Gallant?
Well, I mean, you take a look at some other states that are on par with the spending, and a lot of them have, a handful of them also have school choice or some form of it. And so it allows for more options for parents in an environment that's going to be more conducive to maybe that student's learning style. But I also think that it's not a spending issue, right? I mean, we definitely have some issues here in Nevada in terms of just the systemic problems in our schools. I also think that we probably need to be a little less stringent and more supportive of growing our charter school districts. I mean, they run Their teachers don't get paid as much. They unfortunately were not included in the pay raises last session. I'm hoping that they will be included this session, but they have less per pupil spending, yet their test scores are higher across the board because their infrastructure, their system works. And our public school system is struggling. I think one of the other issues that we run into is that there's Title I schools where the funding incentives is sort of screwed up. So these Title I schools, they've got kids that might have some extra needs, but if their scores are low, they get more money. Their teachers get paid more money. So it's almost like you're getting rewarded for having lower test scores rather than getting rewarded for having higher test scores. I mean, human nature is what it is. We're going to keep doing the behavior that we get rewarded to do, whether it's good or bad.
Before we move on, I do have since we're talking about students, I do have a question. Can you all hear me? I do have a question here from one of our viewers on YouTube, Jessica. What is being done to address food insecurities among students of higher education?
Well, I can tell you that last year I introduced Assembly Bill 319, which created the Universal Breakfast and School Lunch Program, because if we're really concerned about educating our children and making sure that they are 100% set up to succeed, we know that making sure that students are fed is the best way to do it because they are prepared to learn. Absenteeism goes down, grades go up, and Assembly Bill 319 made it through the legislature, got to the governor's desk, and he vetoed it. We had families, it was in Carson City actually went on the record and talked about how they had families who made just a little bit too much, cents too much to qualify for free and reduced school lunch. That doesn't mean that there's not need. If you make $100 too much a year, that doesn't mean that financially you're not strapped. You are then making the decision whether you're putting food on the table, buying prescriptions, paying rent, right? Because you no longer have that food at school for your child because you make $100 too much a year. But I'm very proud to say that Assemblywoman Backus and I are bringing the bill back, a universal school lunch, because again, I believe that every student should have every possibility to be set up to succeed.
And we were talking earlier about lowering costs and making it more affordable to live in Las Vegas and to live in Nevada. And universal school lunch is part of that. Taking one item off of the line item budget for families.
Breakfast and lunch. Breakfast
and lunch, there you go. It's a small thing, but if you can say that families in Nevada, their kids go to school and they are fed, it is one less thing that parents have to worry about when they're trying to balance their budget at home. And I think that it's also important that, as we're talking about schools and we're talking about the quality of Nevada's schools, that, we really think about what we mean by success. Are we talking strictly about test scores, or are we talking about the number of students who become full-time employed by the time they graduate from high school? Are we talking about the number of students who go on to seek higher education, the number of students who complete higher education degrees? How are we measuring that success, and how do we want to measure success before we start, putting labels on whether we're good or bad or whether we're succeeding or not?
So as a small business owner, I work with a lot of other small business owners, and the number one complaint I get from my various partners is that they have people show up to apply for jobs and they can't fill out an application. So when less than 40% of our high school graduate can't read, can't do basic math, they can't fill out an application. So I'm not quite sure how they're going to be able to get a job if they can't fill out an application. And I think the question was about
Higher education.
Higher education, yes. And I don't believe that there is anything that we have looked at in terms of feeding those that are in higher education. The bill that Assemblywoman Jauregui was discussing was K through 12, and the governor has addressed this issue and has assured everybody that every kid that needs a lunch gets a lunch, but he did not want us, our taxpayer dollars, going to paying for food for rich kids.
I think that he was addressing that because Clark County offers it, because Clark County was able to make sure that every student, that's one county out of 17 counties in Nevada. That means 16 other counties have children in their schools who are hungry. Only one county was able to do it.
We have a question over here in the back.
Thank you. My name is Larry Moulton. I appreciate what the legislators did last session, and we talked about that. You increased the funding for education. However, the legislation specifically exempted the third largest district in the state. I hope that that's corrected. I know the governor has called for that to be corrected. Charter schools are the third largest district in the entire state right now, and we are very successful. Charter schools are meeting the needs of the kids. Please extend the funding to charter schools this time.
Totally agree with you. Thank you.
Is there anything specific? Like, like, are we talking like teacher raises or transportation, or like what part of it was
Overall
exempt?
funding, but specifically the raises for the teachers went into effect, but charter schools, the money was withheld from the charter schools. Charter schools are public schools. There's no distinction.
Well, there's distinction. They don't have the same transparency, right? They don't have the same accountability.
Yeah, and I believe the governor recently proposed extending those same teacher raises to the charter school teachers, and also making their transportation funding that they got last session, I think increasing it and also making it permanent. So wondering where you lawmakers stand on extending those also to the
100%
charters.
support.
That's if we can fund it too. I mean, we're having this conversation about what we're going to fund when we don't know if we can fund anything, right? I mean, I told you the budget we received was structurally deficient, $335 million, and even with budget amendments, it's still close to $100 million deficient, right? So, I mean, we can't fund what he's proposing. There's no money, and if we don't get federal dollars, we're going to be cutting things, right? Like there's no funding to fund what he's proposing, and he's proposing a budget that's $2 billion more than last session. So he's spending $2 billion more than he spent last session. Where are we getting this money from? Because we're still in a deficit right now with the budget that he's amended.
So I think it's important to note that there are, three branches of government, and this is why the legislature exists. The governor has created a benchmark, a framework in which where he hopes his policies and his, priorities are, and it's up for the legislature to work through that budget and then propose a budget based on the framework that he has provided to us, and then get that back over to his desk. I mean, people are fallible, right? And what I hope is that, there's better communication this session than there was last session between leadership and the governor's team, so that we can get to a balanced budget. And that is the reason why we have separate branches of government.
All right, you've been raising your hand for a while. What is your name? What's your question?
Will Bradley, and I have a 10-part question. I'm just kidding. Let's talk about the most repressive, democratically elected government that 50% of Nevadans are subjected to, HOAs. I know you hate dealing with it, but not too far from here, Somerset Park, you may have seen, is top of the fold in the papers. 85 families, due to their HOA mismanaging their budgets, almost got evicted and homeless. It took the smarts and the bravery of the city of Henderson and their taxpayers to pony up $700,000 to save their homes because their HOA was too irresponsible to properly fund their reserve account. Senator Buck has a BDR, as well as the city of Henderson has a BDR addressing HOA. I hope we can put politics aside. This is the ultimate nonpartisan issue to bring relief and demand. NRED failed. They failed. If they did their job, those people wouldn't have been facing eviction. It's time, those bills are going to allow the state to bypass NRED in some case and go straight to justice court if you think you need to, which you can't, and forensic audits of reserve funds. Please help 50% of our citizens with their repressive HOAs.
So I was on the front lines of that Somerset. I actually manage 2 properties in that unit, as well as I own one as well. So I just got a really nice letter that we have a $7,800 lien that has to be paid over 3 years, which is fine. And that particular HOA was victim of embezzlement from a previous HOA management company that is no longer. And I will say that there were 2 HOA communities that caught this manager prior to. The division went after her, and then after that, every other HOA that was, left kind of holding the bag because there are no more resources. It is a broken system. I would agree with you. I think the tone last session, when I, as my first session, nobody wants to nobody wants to deal with those HOA bills because they are so inflammatory, almost like the Mustang bill, which we didn't expect to be so inflammatory. But I do agree that that is something that we need to look at to be able to get more power into the homeowners and less within the management companies and the restrictions of it. So I'm here to listen and hear any of your solutions because it is a problem.
And I actually chair the Senate Judiciary Committee. We are the committee that oversees that portion of the NRS, the Nevada Revised Statutes, and all of the HOA bills come through my committee. And I offered every single HOA bill last session a hearing. And so we did have a number of conversations about HOAs, and I fully agree with you that oversight, accountability, transparency with HOAs is not only important and necessary, but it is an unwieldy beast. It is unlike any other quasi-governmental organization where they don't follow one particular structure. One HOA has one, kind of governmental or organizational structure, and then another one has something else. And an HOA can be as small as, 10 homes. It can be as large as, 10,000 homes. And so trying to develop solutions that can address both of those things at the same time, it is a huge undertaking that is also, there is a power imbalance with the profit side of it, that homeowners are not making money off of their HOAs, but there are management companies, there are certain bad actors who do make money. And I'm not saying that HOAs, I'm not saying all HOAs are bad or that they're, they're all, that they're all bad actors. I'm saying that there's an opportunity for bad actors to insert themselves there, which they have done in Nevada. And we're still, 30 years trying to solve this problem, haven't fully developed a solution, but I look forward to tackling it again next year. I think I've heard an HOA bill every year I've been up there.
Oh, I've actually carried one. I still have scars. I was a brand new freshman thinking I knew what I was doing going up against the HOAs, and wow, let me tell you, it is not an easy fight. So I carried a bill to try to regulate HOAs and rein in some of what they can do. I wanted them to be able to super priority lien, but not be able to foreclose if someone owns their home free and clear. And then I came back and I actually passed some bills to help regulate just what Senator Scheible was talking about, right? To bring some uniformity and some consistency amongst all HOAs throughout the state. So I've tackled my fair share of HOA bills, and I'm telling you, I still have battle scars. And
Sorry. I don't. Sorry. Do you want to stand up and introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. My name is Jeff Wald, and I have a couple of things to say. Actually, probably quite a bit, but I'll try to make this quick. As somebody who is, very concerned about fiscal policy on all levels, I appreciate the conversation that we're having. Now, on a federal level, as my friend CT mentioned, says that many government agencies at the end of their fiscal year are trying to spend all of the money that they have. One of the reasons why they're doing that is because for those of us who are familiar with various methods of budgeting, federal government works on a budgeting system that's called baseline budgeting, which basically says, I'm going to get so much money this year, and you're going to get so much money next year. And that's where many people will lie, and they said, oh, we're cutting your spending. Well, you're not cutting the spending, you're cutting the growth in spending. So many people don't understand that because it's a fairly complex subject. So one of the things I'm wondering about is, why does the state not think about other types of budgeting? Like, for example, there's performance-based budgeting, which says, okay, you have to come up with a certain amount of goals, and if you meet the goals, then we'll consider giving you more money. And if you don't, then you won't get the money. I think that was something that was discussed earlier. And then on the other extreme, there's a thing that's called zero-based budgeting, which basically says, all right, you have to justify each and every dollar that you get. So that's something to to think about. Now, another thing that I was thinking about and concerned about is public safety. In particular, traffic safety. One of the things that we read about and we see on the news every day is that there are numerous accidents out there, many fatal accidents, where motorists and pedestrians are killed because people are speeding or people are running red lights, or, for example, as I was driving over here, I was in the left turn lane, making the left turn from Pecos onto Flamingo. There was a guy that was walking across the street, not in the crosswalk, but he was walking behind some cars. Yeah. So now I know that the sheriff has talked about the possibility of installing red light cameras to try to catch all these people who are running red lights, and it's a daily thing. Well, as I lived in Alameda County for 16 years, and Fremont, where they have cameras and they seem to work, and also one of the neighboring cities, Union City, had cameras, and they actually took them out because they weren't working. So are we talking to other jurisdictions about that? Try to get an idea of what works and what doesn't. If anybody's interested, I still know people in both of those cities and high places that you can talk to about their experience.
So we have worked with delegations or legislators from other states. We have worked with some national organizations on traffic safety. Again, I chair the Judiciary Committee, and so a lot of traffic, in addition to the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, a lot of traffic laws come through my committee. And we have been trying to figure out what we can do to increase road safety and to decrease these pedestrian collisions especially. And we've had so many conversations about traffic cameras, including red light cameras. And I'm confident in saying right now that the data is mixed on whether or not they are effective. And we've also been talking so much today about government spending. I think this is, an excellent example of the kind of debate that we have in the legislature, because generally those traffic cameras are run by private corporations and it is a money-making operation for them. So we as a government today, if somebody writes you a ticket for running a red light and you pay a $250 fine, that full $250 goes to the government. It might be split between the city and the county and the highway fund, but it all goes to the government. When you put a red light camera in there, you start paying $10 of every $250 fine to the red light camera company. And so is that how we want to spend our money? As Nevadans, do we want to pay a third-party corporation to get rich off of Nevadans who are running red lights? I don't think so. I'm not sure if that was obvious or not. But those are the kinds of conversations that we have. And so I do have a bill, a traffic infrastructure bill, that does a small thing to increase traffic safety by increasing the width of a crosswalk and by increasing the buffer zone outside of crosswalks. And that has been studied on a national level to show that when you don't have cars within 20 feet of a crosswalk, you have fewer collisions when people are utilizing that crosswalk. And I would also like to take this opportunity to get up on my soapbox and make a very quick PSA. Do not drive when you are intoxicated. I am a criminal defense attorney. I represent people in DUIs every single day. I would rather not make the money. And I will also tell you that whatever it's going to cost you to take a car home is way less than what you'll have to pay me to help you with your DUI. So think of it like an insurance policy. Even if you only need to call that car 1 out of every 10 times, call it every 10 times, and you'll still end up ahead as opposed to paying an attorney to take care of your DUI. And that is my public service announcement.
When it comes to the traffic cams, this is one issue that both Democrats and Republicans equally do not like. For various reasons, right? But we also do like the idea of reducing traffic crashes, right? and fatalities within these intersections that seem to be problems. I've had a lot of discussion with Metro about this and Sheriff McMahill. So one of the things that I said, like, I will consider this, provided that we can actually prove that it works. So maybe pick 20 intersections over the next 2 years to show that it's actually reduced these traffic fatalities and these accidents. My other request was that I did not want this to be a moneymaker for the state. So the hard costs of the cameras are funded by those private companies, but then anything above that would definitely go to the police department, right? And I don't want them to be incentivized. So my request is that any of that extra money would actually be given out to vouchers to various bars or establishments to be able to do Ubers or cab drive for anybody that's drunk so that they can get them home safely.
Yeah, I think this is one issue we can all agree on. I mean, I'm open to the discussion. That's what we do. We hear arguments, right? And then we take in the information and make decisions. But one of the things I also do is reach out to my district to find out. And I will tell you that my constituency, I mean, they are well informed that this is the way the government's trying to make money. We don't want this in our district, so.
Or Big Brother's watching us. That's what I keep hearing. So people are nervous about that. So I think it's worth looking into, but I just think that they need to prove proof of concept.
All right, what is your question and what is your name? Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for your time, ladies. Really appreciate it. My name is Anahit Bakhshetyan, and I'm with Nevada Policy Research Institute. So my question for you today refers to earlier this month, Governor Joe Lombardo mentioned in his State of the State address that one of his legal priorities pertains to the 300 boards and commissions that the government has. And these boards, whether they're regulatory, task force, or occupational boards, they have been burdensome on the state when it comes to occupational licensing, specifically funds, fees, and they're generally funded by taxpayer dollars. There has been a bill draft, there has been a huge research, which Nevada Policy also has been advocating for months. So what we've been wondering as citizens of the state is, where do we see legislators take this bill and this issue during the session? Because there's only so much that a governor or a citizen could do when it comes to state boards and commissions. So we would be relying on the legislative action. So it would be interesting to see where you guys are going to take this issue.
Most of the boards are actually not taxpayer funded. They're actually fee funded by the licensees. And so that's one of the things I think is really important, because right now they're run by, a board that's paid for by the fees of the person who's coming to get a license or renew a license. So we are going to take that away and make it, it's proposed to be taken away and now make it a responsibility of a state agency, which would then, we would be collecting the fees, but then that would now be a new cost to the state. And so, again, because we're so conscious of the budget this legislative session, we have to look at what is the fiscal impact of that going to be to the state, because the state agency is going to have to take on the burden of overseeing 300 boards, right? I chaired Commerce and Labor. I chaired, which all the boards come through. I chaired the Sunset Subcommittee, and the Sunset Subcommittee's task was to review boards and decide whether they are needed or not. Are we going to sunset them, right? Do they need to be taken over under a conservatorship? Are they properly run? Are they not properly run, right? A lot of boards are properly run. I will tell you, like the Cosmetology Board, the Nevada State Contractors Board, right? 100% funded by licensing fees. It runs perfectly. So my biggest concern is, what is the fiscal impact of that going to be to the state? Because we are going to have to create, if it goes under B&I, right, we're going to have to create a new division, or we're going to have to hire people to regulate something that's working.
Assemblywoman Gallant.
Yeah, so NPRI, it's a great organization. Please say hi to John for me. I mean, I know NPRI and a lot of citizens, we've been taking a look at how can we reduce the barrier of entry? And maybe kind of reducing boards and commissions could be one thing that's helpful. I mean, whether you call it a tax or a fee, it's still a tax on the citizens, right? In order for me to be able to operate in this industry, I'm gonna have to pay some fees. And I think one of the things that we've looked at is contractors are one of the few industries where they can get a multi-jurisdictional license, but somebody like me who operates in all three, I have to get a state business license, one in Henderson, Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas. That's a huge amount of costs every single year. I've been in business for 12 years, so we've figured it out, but somebody who's just trying to get in, right, is definitely more difficult. I'm working with the Institute for Justice this year, trying to do, just maybe take a look at some regulations and help reduce the barrier of entry. One of the bills that I brought forward last year was, this is funny, like the handyman, like it's not really a license, but it's non-permitted work that they're allowed to do. And it's capped at $1,000 for material and labor. And that's been like that since the 1970s. And so you can't, those guys can't get to the next level, whether it's an electrical contractor or a general contractor, when they're barely making minimum wage, which is dictated by the state. So we're looking to be able to expand that. Senator Flores is going to be carrying that bill. And so I think there's other ways, not just the boards and commissions, in which we can just really reduce regulation and reduce the barrier of entry for Nevadans so that they can just earn a living.
And not just for Nevadans, like you mentioned the fees to the cities and the counties and the state, but those are business fees. Those aren't like those aren't trade fees. Like if you're, perfect example, a contractor, right? You're paying your license fee to the contractor's board, but then that's separate and apart from your business fees, right? But I agree, we need to reduce barriers to occupational licensing, and we have mechanisms to do that, right? Like we work on bills all the time, especially, having Nellis and Creech here to help, people who are coming to Nevada to be on the base to help their spouses, whether it's, anesthesiology, doctors, right, cosmetologists, barbers. Like we have reciprocity so that they can come in and automatically be licensed. So we do work on reducing barriers to licensure.
Got a question over here from this gentleman who's been waiting very patiently.
Not a problem. It's been very interesting. And my name is Kirk Clyott. I came to Las Vegas for 2 weeks 10 years ago, and I'm still here. So clearly our community has a lot of good things going for it. And I think one of the things is having a female majority legislature, which generally speaking keeps the insanity level a little less, it seems, in Carson City than we see in DC. But what you guys have not mentioned is I live in East Las Vegas, a great eclectic neighborhood, no HOA, thank God, because our ducks in the backyard would be very unhappy with the price of eggs these days. We appreciate their hard work in the backyard. And as far as just gentlemen here speaking about traffic, I love traffic cameras, just not traffic enforcement cameras. So how about license plates? How about more legislation to get people to actually put a license plate on their car? But the main issue I wanted to address is something I haven't heard talked about here and is extremely important in my neighborhood, and that is homelessness. I have an entire file on my phone of just people that I have taken pictures of within a short walk from my house that are experiencing homelessness. For a few months, 18 years ago, I was homeless, so I have great empathy for these folks. But something has got to be done. We've actually called paramedics for people that have passed out in front of our house. There have been so many people, and I've talked to them, and these are real people, and I think a lot of people don't look at them as real people. But the status quo is unacceptable. I had our commissioner, Tick Siggerbloom, he actually came to my house because I had to show him some of the RVs that we could not get off the street. I understand, and you could correct me if I'm wrong here, there's legislation in this session to make it easier to get these RVs that people are living in off the street. And that dovetails into my other issue here that I haven't heard spoken of, is gun violence. In my street, I love my eclectic neighborhood, but all kinds of things happen. And on January 3rd, less than 100 yards from my front door, a woman was murdered in her car, and the other woman was shot. It's barely a blip on the news, but how can we keep living this circumstance? We had last summer, and what got the county commissioner to come to the house, months and months of trying to get these RVs off the street, and the guy is armed. And I talked to Metro, and I say, this guy clearly having a tough time. He's living in 110-degree heat, but he's packing heat. He's got a gun on. And they said, we can't do anything. There's no lawful way to remove these people from the streets. And so that is what I would consider one of the top 2 or 3 issues in my neighborhood, getting help and getting them off our streets that we've got for the homeless community. And I don't know in Nevada, open carry state, if there's anything can be done. But believe me, one thing I've learned in my neighborhood in 10 years, longest place I've ever lived in my life, is tell the difference between fireworks and gunshots. It's a skill as a young person I never knew I'd need to get, but living here in Nevada I have. And to let you go with one quick little light thing, now that I'm old, I'm semi-retired now, I wanted to play my video poker and get my buffets. Obviously the buffets are gone, but one way that could make the casinos a little more responsive to their local customers is if we had the lottery. So, is to make, because those customers, Boyd and all those people that contribute lots to your campaigns, they don't love us as much as they used to, in my opinion. There's no way you're going to convince me that the Fertittas and the Boyd Corporation, they love us as much as they did in 2015. So let's give them some pressure and bring the lottery to the state. But the most important issue I have, I think, is the homelessness, especially in like my community. Thank you all very much.
Sure. So I think, addressing homelessness it has to be a multifaceted approach. And one of the main issues that we have to address is figuring out the underlying causes. I think that in recent years, we've learned that a lot of people are struggling with mental health problems and with substance abuse problems and addiction. And so, again, we're going to go back to the conversation we started with funding and ensuring that that we have the funding available to provide services. And I think that we have seen in other communities where the services are funded to provide people with options and to provide them with alternatives to homelessness, they take advantage of those opportunities. And so we're working in Nevada on continuing to invest in our public and behavioral health system. We're working on investing in opening up more beds in the facilities that treat people who have mental health problems or who are experiencing a mental health crisis. We've been working on setting up a crisis line in Nevada, a 988 number that people can call that does not produce a police response, but produces kind of like a mental health first aid or a mental health first responder who can, so we have the number set up, but we're still working on funding the crisis response teams and the crisis response centers and having a place where, once an ambulance or right now it's a volunteer, once somebody is deployed to a place like your neighborhood to interface with someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis, they have to have somewhere where they can take them, somewhere that, and we have to be able to do this in a way that is responsive to the community, because I think that, where you live, they're not going to respond well to police officers coming in with lights and sirens. They need a different kind of what we call a warm handoff. Somebody who is going to take them in a normal looking car to a place where they can sit down inside, especially in the heat, where they can have a glass of water and someone will talk to them like a human being and figure out what's going on and what can we do for your crisis today. And not just today, but tomorrow and the day after, and what kind of services do we need to connect you to? What kind of services do you need long term? And so that's something that, I've been working on for, since I started in the legislature back in 2018, developing these crisis response centers. And it is a slow moving process to get all of the pieces into place. But I think that today it's more important than ever.
And we've actually have made investments. So we are working on a public-private partnership to build a campus for hope, where people who are unhoused, homeless people, right, they can go and seek shelter. So we gave, the state of Nevada invested $100 million in the last legislative session. It was a bill that we passed, and we were only going to give it if there was private capital raised to match it, and the private capital was raised. So now there's a $200 million investment to build a campus for hope so that homeless people can go to a place where they can actually get services, a place where they can go, get off the streets and seek the help that they need. So those investments are happening because we've seen what's happening. And again, the state of Nevada was committed, and so were our private partners, to helping fix this. You also touched on gun violence. I mean, if there's anything that I work on at the state legislature, that's probably my priority. When I leave, I want my legacy to be that I left the state of Nevada safer than when I found it. I've always been an advocate for gun violence prevention. When I first ran in 2016, question 1 was on the ballot, which was passing universal background checks, right? So when I was going door to door and speaking to constituents, I just wasn't talking about why they should vote for me, but I was also talking about why they needed to pass question 1, right? How people would use it to circumvent background checks if they went to a gun show, if they went private sale. They didn't have to, but if they went to a gun dealer, right, they had to get a background check. And so I was always an advocate, but it wasn't until till 1 October. I happened to be there on the night of 1 October at the Route 91 Music Festival, and to experience something that I never thought I would have to experience. So as you say, you've learned to differentiate between fireworks and gunshots. I haven't. So fireworks are still very traumatic for me. But since that day, I've decided to make it my life mission to pass common sense gun violence prevention laws, because I never want someone to be able, well, to have to go through what I went through, because it doesn't just affect the victims, it affects the community. We all know, we were all here in Nevada. It affects your friends, it affects your family, it affects your neighbors. We all rallied to show up, right, to donate blood. You know, I couldn't. That's one of the things that I think I am most embarrassed about, is that I was so traumatized after 1 October that I could not leave my house to go donate blood, right? And I hated that it was so traumatic for me. But we've done a great job here in Nevada. We've done in passing gun violence prevention laws. That very first session after 1 October, we passed Assembly Bill 291, which banned bump stocks, which was the technology that Stephen Paddock used to cause mayhem and destruction and kill so many people and shoot so many others in 11 minutes, right? And we passed bump stocks during a time when there was a federal regulation to regulate them. And most of the opposition I got was, why are you doing this? Federal regulation already exists, right? And I'm so glad that we pushed forward and we passed it, because that federal regulation was overturned. So here in Nevada, we're still protected. We're one of 13 states that still ban bump stocks because we didn't give up. And in speaking about like homelessness and behavioral health, one of the other things that we passed that year was extreme risk protection orders, right? So that if someone is a danger to themselves or to someone else, someone can go file a petition at court and they will have their due process in court. And if the judge agrees that they are a harm to themselves, they can have firearms temporarily removed from the home. We also reduced the blood alcohol content that could be present while in possession of a firearm. It was actually higher than that of a DUI. So there's things that we've done. We've banned ghost guns, which are unserialized firearms, right? So people who couldn't pass background checks, children who weren't 18 could order ghost gun kits online and build them in under 30 minutes at their kitchen table and have a fully functioning firearm. So we've made those illegal now in the state of Nevada. So we're taking steps to make sure that we're reducing gun violence.
Assemblywoman Gallant, you get the last word.
Oh, thank you. Mental health is an issue. I mean, there are a lot of people that are homeless. They are struggling with just everyday living, right? And a lot of organizations, some really amazing organizations, are out there trying to help them find services, and some of them just don't want to comply, and that's okay. Like, they have a right to do that. However, now with that Supreme Court ruling last year, cities are allowed to be able to ensure that they have, cleared streets, but we do need to be able to provide better wraparound services. For a little while, I was working with those organizations trying to house those that wanted to get off the street, but there wasn't enough wraparound services, so they brought like these maladaptive behaviors into the communities that I was managing and causing, unsafe situation for the rest of my residents. So I've been working with DFS on other ways that we can provide supportive services so that we can continue to work with this program. So I'm sorry that you've been going through that. That's your home, that's your community, and you really want to be able to be safe. In terms of gun violence, I'm really excited. I'm introducing a bill that would be a voluntary option for somebody that says, I'm not in a really good emotional place, or maybe you're a parent and you've got a kid that's not in a good place, where they could actually go and take their guns to a gun store and be able to store them. Currently, right now, that's against federal law, but this would actually allow them to be able, the stores to be able to hold the guns for an indefinite period of time until somebody's in a better space. So it's gonna be great for our veterans, and I think it cuts through all that red tape and the bureaucracy and people being scared of their rights being taken away, of having to fight to get them back. And so I hope that that's something that you could work with me on.
I'm actually introducing the same bill. So I actually introduced it modeled off of the state of Washington. The state of Washington did voluntary surrender a handful of years ago. And it just became model legislation through Council of State Governments because another state has picked it up and done it. And so I'm actually introducing the same bill.
Okay, well, we'll have to merge them then.
Sir, we're going to have to cut you off because we're going way over time.
That's all the time that we have for this evening, so sorry. Thank you so much for the super engaging conversation and for being here tonight, including everyone who tuned in to the live stream.
Senator Melanie Scheible, Assemblywoman Sandra Jauregui, and also Assemblywoman Danielle Gallant, thank you so much for your time.
And remember that the 83rd session of the Nevada Legislature starts next week, February 3rd. Both the Nevada Independent and Vegas PBS will be covering the major issues throughout the session.
And you can find coverage of tonight's event on both of our websites, vegaspbs.org, also the nevadaindependent.com. Thank you for coming.